The Inconnu are the quintessential boogeyman of the vampire world. The perfect patsy to any prince or bishop who lacks a proper threat to pin the blame on, and spoken of in hushed whispers in coteries of fresh-faced kindreds or packs of former shovelheads with dirt still stuck under their nails. Whenever plans are foiled mysteriously, even the most seasoned of leaders within these sects cannot help but wonder, if only for a moment, whether this shadowy group of sectless vampires were behind it. Ironic, considering the fact that the Inconnu have declared themselves unrelated to any and all political matters of the vampire world, isolating themselves in pursuit of Golconda, the fabled state of being that allows a kindred to subdue and shackle their beast. Yet this very idea is in conflict with the presence of the Monitors, elder kindred who, under orders from these very same Inconnu, observe vampiric activities of their cities and report back to their masters. Some go even further, subtly manipulating the locals in order to further the agenda of their hidden masters. The Inconnu are said to be carrying on the legacy of Saulot himself, disciples to his teachings who likewise seek enlightenment through rigorous self-denial and spiritual testing. Castle Hunedoara in Romania remains one of the few known locations where the Inconnu are said to reside, yet it also remains protected by ancient magic, and is thus unfindable lest the inhabitants of the castle allow someone entry. Once it was thought that the Inconnu operated en masse from this castle, that it was some manner of secret headquarters for a world-spanning brotherhood, but other tales contest this, claiming instead that it merely serves as a home to 12 members of the faction, each a scholar in the pursuit of Golconda. The Salubri, Saulot's cursed progeny, forsaken by their sire, are said to carry on the tradition of Golconda in their bloodline, yet not all of them are members of the Inconnu, and not all Inconnu are Salubri. Indeed, the clan as a whole may never be allowed entry into this allegedly apolitical faction, as their anti-tribute remains a driving force of the Sabbat. Yet such claims can be easily dismissed considering the fact that Rebecca, the Monitor of Chicago, is Ventru, a clan hardly known for staying out of kindred politics. Unless, of course, she is not Inconnu. Yet, as the Monitor of Chicago lost her way and fell from Golconda, she was cast aside by this ancient order despite years of loyal service, and found herself grasping desperately for any chance to be brought back into the fold, traveling to Hunedoara in a vain attempt to seek guidance in returning to Golconda, considering that the key to being admitted into her former organization. But who are the Inconnu, and why have they come to inhabit the castle once known as Castle Ruthven, having belonged to the ancient Tzimisce bloodline said to have been founded by a childer of the eldest itself? Is this castle the heart of the Inconnu, or are these 12 kindred merely a faction of the larger group, or perhaps not even related at all? It is no secret that kindred have long been manipulating the mortal world from the shadows. As city-states began to form all across the Greek peninsula and archipelagos, vampires from the Ventru, La Sombra, and Malkavian clans would subtly guide these fledgling nations in an attempt to secure power and prosperity for themselves. They were quite successful, but the results of these manipulations were often war and suffering. It was a precarious balance, and the greed of their masters meant the end of many of these states. After the war against Carthage, the Toreador would join this coalition and bring with it great cultural development. The coalition would come to rule in the shadows of Rome, and in various incarnations would survive beyond the fall of their great empire. The La Sombra left as Rome crumbled, and the Tzimisce took their place, but their methods were still very much the same. They extended their reach north, east, and west, scrambling for power through the manipulation of mortal means. Yet they were embittered by the loss of their great empire, and the Order, as they now called themselves, grew to hate the Byzantine Empire for daring to stand tall even as their power base remained shaky. They especially loathed the trinity of Michael, Antonius, and Drakon, the rulers of Constantinople who worked hard to see Michael's dreams of a Cainite utopia of enlightenment become reality in their capital city. They would do everything in their power to undermine the triumvirate ruling over Constantinople, and while they succeeded in weakening the Byzantine Empire, it fell due to the eventual collapse of the relationship between the Trinity. The fall of Constantinople planted a seed of doubt amongst the members of this order, however, and several events during that era, including the diablerie of several antediluvians and the Anarch Revolt, which threatened the stability of all Cainites, drove home the point what far-reaching consequences their manipulation could have. Thus they turned inwards, hoping to pursue Golconda, rumored to have once been found by great Saulot himself, who had, not too long ago, been diablerized by the Tremere. No longer would they let the Jihad steer their actions, but rather they would stand above their petty, scheming natures and act as beacons of inspiration for their lessers. Of course, they would face fierce opposition, and as the war with the Tremere broke out, the Order, which had withdrawn to the Carpathians, isolated themselves in Castle Hunedoara, summoning an ancient demon to hide the castle's true location. There they would remain, hiding from the world around them, but more and more kindred would seek to join the Inconnu, tired of the Jihad and wishing for a greater purpose to their undead existence. Many of these prospects would become monitors for this loosely affiliated sect, sent out to watch any major community of vampires, be they Camarilla, Anarch, or Sabbat, and report back what was happening. The Inconnu would not allow any members of thin blood into their midst, often requiring at least a generation as low as 6. Even if one were to meet these expectations, there are no recruitment offices. The Inconnu will find any hopeful candidates who catch their interest, and may test the convictions of these hopefuls rigorously before putting them forward to the sect. Diablerie is considered a sin by most members, albeit far from as damning as it might have been otherwise described, especially when one takes into consideration that the Inconnu allegedly have achieved Golconda. It and Diablerie are said to be mutually exclusive, and thus one is made to wonder whether they truly are, or if the Inconnu may not in fact have achieved this legendary heightened state of being. The Inconnu are also said to have been divided into several smaller factions, yet their loose structure allowed for this, as long as it did not threaten the stability of the sect itself, or cause a schism within which would allow for the Jihad to take root among them. The Seekers are what most would connect to the Inconnu if they have a basic understanding of this sect. These kindred would either be in pursuit of, or have achieved Golconda, and would consider it their duty to help their fellow vampires walk the same path. The Purifiers, likewise, would work towards the betterment of their kind. In this case, they seek to reconcile vampire beliefs and lifestyles with the modern age and science, hoping that it may seek to unite their kind and help end the Jihad. The Immaculates, on the other hand, believe that only by embracing their vampiric natures fully can they escape the shackles of their struggles. These kindred rarely, if ever, walk the path of humanity, abandoning it for paths far more alien in nature, yet with a clear religious or spiritual nature that appeals to their vampirism. The Haunted, finally, would instead seek to starve the beast inside them at every opportunity. Only by driving it out, by making their souls uninhabitable by this possession, could they be freed from it and ascend above their base natures. Of course, these 4 factions may never have existed in the first place. Or they may have, but might not have had any connection to the Inconnu. Many kindred have come to believe that the Inconnu is not a group or a sect, but rather just an umbrella term for any kindred who are trying to escape the clutches of the Jihad. It would perhaps make the most sense, as that would explain the oftentimes contradicting stories we have been told of them. It is a fact, however, that the 12 who inhabit Hunedoara Castle at least claim to be Inconnu, perhaps even the leaders of whatever sect takes that name, and they have agents known as Equites who travel the world in their stead. In this castle they organize reports from the monitors, judge matters of their sect, and of course merely exist, as their existence in itself helps inspire more wayward vampires to join them. Unbeknownst to most, these 12 are forever bound to remain within the walls of the castle, as this was the price the council paid the demon who protects them from the outside world. There they remain, unless someone is to take their place. Of particular note to the Inconnu is the Master of Ravens. This enigmatic preacher has become known around the world for the pamphlet he has spread called The One True Way. This text is supposedly a method by which one may work towards Golconda, but it is incomplete, and the Master of Raven urges those who read it to find Hunedoara Castle where they will find their salvation. Yet this man harbors a deep, overwhelming hatred for the Inconnu and the Golconda they preach. He believes it merely to be a trap with which to ensnare and enslave kindred, and thus he hopes to bring the entire sect down. Yet some argue that the very teachings that this Master of Raven shares are far more dangerous than anything made by the Inconnu, for they guide the reader down a path of corruption and evil, which will forever bind their souls to him, or perhaps to his masters, which some speculate might even be Saulot himself, the original Master of Golconda. One of the 12 of the Inner Council of the Inconnu has referred to himself as the Master of Ravens at times, and some who know this speculate that this is the same person. that perhaps he is acting through the bodies of his followers as he remains trapped within the castle. If this is the case, then one must wonder if the inhabitants of Hunedoara Castle are actually loyal to each other, or even to their sect. As I'm sure has become clear, the more one studies the Inconnu, the less one will know for sure. Like a ghostly apparition, it changes shape and purpose depending on which lens you will look through it at. Is it any wonder then that the clever bishop may decide to send a distrusted pack on a wild goose chase after agents of this mysterious sect, knowing full well that when they fail, and fail they will need to face their ruler's wrath? Or that princes of the Camarilla amuse their cold, undead hearts by acting against their fellow regents under the guise of this Schrodinger's faction. Even Dracula himself is said to be a member of the Inconnu, yet if he is, we have nothing but hearsay to prove it with. This video was brought to you by my patron Loren Eason. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for your support.